Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the International Conference on Consciousness-Based Leadership and Management. This is our session number 12, day number 3. This session is about Vedic approaches to oneness and flourishing. We have fantastic panels, some of the greatest thinkers and practitioners of Vedic approaches. And at the end of this session, we hope to give you or produce some takeaways in terms of what is it that we can learn to reach oneness and flourishing. So that will happen. At this point, I will hand over the baton to my dear friend, Dr. Satinder Dhiman, who will be our moderator and session chair, everyone. And then we have 4 great panelists. So Dr. Dhiman, please take it away.
Thank you, Anilji, for first of all, giving me the opportunity to be among this august group of panelists. And also we have attendees from all over the world. So I feel humbled and honored to be a part of this august gathering. Our goal, as has been delineated by you and the organizers, is very clear. Our goal is to understand what are the Vedic approaches to oneness and flourishing, and then how can we use that wisdom to live our lives going forward. Because wisdom only has meaning if we embody that in our life. If we are able to live that wisdom, what I call from moment to moment. The only definition of wisdom is it is intelligence lived from moment to moment. I am an ordinary student of Bhagavad Gita, so allow me to start with the Vedic Mangalacharan. Vasudev Sutam Devam Kans Chanur Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Guru Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Log Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshvam Vadarayanam Sutra Bhashkrito Vande Bhagavanto Puna Puna Ishro Guru Rarmeti Murti Bhed Vibhagini Vyomvat Vyap Dehaye Dakshina Murtiye Nama Sadashiv Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Parampram. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahno Bhunaktu Sahviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavit Vishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namah. Almost all religions of the world emphasize oneness, that at the very core, even the quantum mechanics, by saying God particle, when they are not able to go any further than energy, they said, well, it's God particle. It's like throwing your hands in the air, God particle. They believe that there is, at the very base of everything, there is only one essence. And if you want to live a life of fulfillment and flourishing, then somehow, whether through the route of science or through the route of spirituality, you have to make contact with that tattva. Saya Esha Anima, that as the Rishi says in Chandogya Upanishad, that anima, that subtle essence, which is the basis of everything, you have to make a contact with that. And until we make a contact with that, we are not able to live a life of flourishment or life of fulfillment. Srimad Bhagavad Gita starts and ends with a very simple message: do not worry. Na anushochanti pandita. This is the beginning of Lord Krishna's opening message in chapter 2, verse 11. Na anushochanti pandita. The wise do not grieve. And Shri Krishna ends Bhagavad Gita's message at 1866 saying, Ma shucha, do not worry. Very clear, Ma shucha. So the whole purpose of this scripture is to help us live a life of fulfillment. I'm going to share only few verses which I consider to be paradigmic verses, which will define the paradigm of oneness. And then I will leave it in the hands of my able colleagues and dear friends to further embellish and kind of like a picture, embellish it with their beautiful contribution of coloring, so to speak. Now, in Christianity, for example, there is a vision, love thy neighbor. There was a great German scholar, Paul Dusen. The year was 1895, and it was one of the most important Theosophical Society conferences at Adar. And Paul Dusen opens the remarks. The address is available on the internet for those who want to dig deeper. He says that although Christianity gives the view that love thy neighbor as thyself, however, how to do that is given only in the Vedas. This is the great German scholar. And he says that if you really want to love everyone as yourself, you need a vision, you need a perspective, you need a nuqtah nigah, as in Urdu they say. You need that perspective, that vision, which will help you cognize that oneness in everyone. Only then you will be truly able to love. Only then it will be a natural flowering of your love for humanity. And we need that. At this juncture, humanity has come to a point where we have 128 times the resources to destroy the planet. 128 times we can destroy the planet. We have so much destructive power. The only thing which can deter us is to have this vision. And I'm going to share 2 or 3 or maybe 4 verses, and then I will hand it over to my able colleagues. It is very interesting, Anilji, that in Bhagavad Gita, the chapter 6th is considered to be a chapter on meditation. Yet, it is a chapter on this particular chapter. In this particular chapter, there is only one verse, which I consider to be quintessential meditation verse. Rest of the verses are in a different direction. Just to give you the beauty of this particular chapter, the word yoga, yogi, and yogam, and leaving other the cognates, the word yoga aside, occurs 41 times. If you take the complete cognates of yoga, it occurs about 150 times, according to Van Buiten, who translated most of Mahabharata, one of the greatest scholars of West to ever grace the translation of Indian scriptures. He says 150 times, but if you take those lesser cognates out, 41 times. Out of 41 times, 21 times these words occur in chapter 6. This is generally overlooked, little minor detail by many scholars. So that means, so I'm going to basically today make my point using 2 or 3 verses from chapter 6 and maybe a couple of others, and then that will be it. Lord Krishna says in chapter 6, verse 30, very beautifully, he says, Yo mam pashyati sarvatra. He who sees me. The word me, mam, in Bhagavad Gita does not mean a particular person. Here, Shri Krishna, it means the totality of existence. It means mam word. If you understand the word mam in Bhagavad Gita, you understand the secret to tattvataha, knowing Lord tattvataha. And that is mam, meaning the pure consciousness which dwells in each of us. How? As a sakshi. This is the most unique, if you ask me, what is the most unique contribution of Indian philosophy to the world, which doesn't occur anywhere in any form, even close, and that is this concept of sakshi. Sakshi Chaitanya, aprilupta sakshi Chaitanya, something which never goes out of consciousness. You can never negate your own awareness. You can never say, I am not aware. This is the only capital that you have. Everything else is learned and can be challenged. There is no principle, no doctrine, categorical statement is being made in this webinar today. There is no principle, no finding of science which cannot be negated tomorrow. There was Einstein, there was Newton, there is Einstein, and then some part of Einstein's theory is being challenged. Every part of psychology, philosophy, history, you name it, can be challenged tomorrow, what you know today. But the only two facts which will never change is that I exist and I know I exist. The Satyam Jnanam part of our Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, the Satyam Shivam Sundaram, the Satyam Shivam part can never be challenged. So, Yo Mam Pashyati Sarvatra, Sarvam Cha Mai Pashyati, Tasya Ham Na Pranashyami, Sa Cha Mai Na Pranashyate. Meaning, he who sees me, the spirit, the pure consciousness. The word pure doesn't mean that it is morally pure. It includes that. But the word pure means there is nothing second to it, because impurity comes from something second to it. Fear comes if you have the other. The other is the hell, as Albert Camus once put it, the great philosopher. If there is no other, there is no fear. Tatra kah shok kah moh ekatmam anupashada, Isha Upanishad says. To that person who has seen the oneness, that person has nothing to fear and nothing to grieve over. That is true flourishing. So when you see the one spirit dwelling in everyone, how can you harm someone? Tell me. If you really realize that my neighbor is nothing but the expression of the same divinity that dwells in me, that dwells in Jerry, that dwells in Dr. Kapoor and Dr. Vaidya, all of that is one. Then hurting you will be hurting myself in essence, and nobody can hurt oneself. That is the vision Bhagavad Gita gives. The last verse that I wanted to share, that is 632. Atma ekatva opmena sarvam yo pashyati Arjuna. Sukham va yadi va dukkham sa yogi paramo mata. A person who sees in others like himself or herself, whatever he feels, joy or sorrow, like he or she feels joy or sorrow in himself, he or she feels the same joy and sorrow. Atma opmena, just like one's own Atma. That person is Paramo Yogi, Paramo Mata. That person is Parama Yogi. 15 times the word yogi comes in Bhagavad Gita. Only in this verse, the Lord used the word Paramo. The highest attainment of yogi is when you see in everyone, when you feel the dukkha, the sorrow of everyone like your own dukkha, when you feel the happiness of other people like you feel in your, then you have attained that Parama Yogi Tattva in our scriptures.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's very much an honor for me to be here. And thank you, Anil, for asking me for this session. And I would like to share a case, a home healthcare case in the Netherlands, which may help us a bit to see how can we put some of the more philosophical ideas into practice. And I have created one slide which I would like to show you. And based on that, I will tell about philosophy. It's opening. So I'm going to talk about organization which is called Buurtzorg. Let me just put some of the main characteristics first before I'm going to talk about this model which I developed this morning. Buurtzorg is an organization in the home healthcare and started in 2006. And right now we have about 14,000 nurses and domestic helpers. And the main characteristic is that it has no managers. So it is a CEO and a director. These two are running, you may say, formally the company. But that's not true because we have many teams, and these are about 1,000 teams across the country. We have 55 staff members. We don't have any departments like HR department or financial departments. We have 20 coaches, and these coaches are helping these teams in different kinds of facilitating their thinking when they are hiring people. They are helping them out when there are conflicts, but everything is being run by themselves. The teams are working like intrapreneurial teams. They have full autonomy, but still they are on the payroll of Buurtzorg. So it's a very, very interesting company. It has also therefore awarded many prizes, and recently the Peter Drucker Award of the best idea into practice. And I have been associated with them from 2011 as researcher and then as advisor. So it's a double role which I have. And I've learned a lot from them, but they also have learned a lot from me. Because what I tried to do is I brought some of the Vedic approaches as a lens to see, okay, what is happening? Because people were very much interested in the high growth, the success, the high client satisfaction rate, and all of these were attracting a lot of attention. And so we are active in more than 20 countries at the moment, including India. And the main thing was, of course, to see, okay, what is the fundamental thing that is happening? What is the more underlying or unified field of action which is taking place? So that's why I built this framework for you to explain. There was a very clear vision when they started in 2006, and the vision was just to put the client at the center focus. And you may say every company puts the client at the center focus, so what's so new about it? But the way it has been put into practice is very much close to how we naturally would do the things. So if you treat a patient, and by the way, we don't call it a patient, we say client, because if you label a person as a patient, he will feel sick, while maybe, he has a lot of positive abilities to recover. So putting the client at the center focus, and at the same time, looking at the processes, and the processes should be arranged around helping the client. So the higher purpose is leading a company with this purpose of putting the client at the center. So the client is satisfied, but also the nurses who are doing the work has a lot of freedom, autonomy to do the work the way they want to do it, because we trust them that they have the capacity as a nurse, and they have that empathetical feeling as well to understand what is going on in those clients. So the mantra of the company is putting humanity above bureaucracy, to say actually that let's look at the relationships between people, and then we look at what needs to be organized. So, and in Dutch we say eerst buurten dan zorgen, which is let's build, before we go to the work, let's build that relationship. So relationship, and then caring. So first coffee and then the work. That's the kind of the mantra that we use there. And I have been writing a lot about them. And what I'm going to share here just with this graph is that I've looked at the decision-making of the nurses, what is happening. And I've been observing them, and I found these two spirals, these kind of circles, you can say. And I labeled it as integrative simplification, where I say there are three main principles being applied: needing, what is needed in the environment of the client, but also what does the client have, looking at the resources, rethinking, because each client is unique, so that authentic context of the home and the client and the individual competencies and abilities of the client are being taken into account. And the third one is common sense. And I called it common sensing, which is not a proper English word, but I use grounded theory, and grounded theory allows us to bring in more dynamic words when we build the theory. So then I looked at it very closely, what is happening. So what I found is that there is some kind of a process which is uh, tapping first from what is there present in the outer, and then going inside. And the other one, other movement which is happening in the decision making is coming from the more formless part, which we may call intuition, and then getting to much more clarity and form. Because when you talk to the nurses, they will say sometimes things like, I have a lot of clinical reasoning, but that's never enough. It's my own feeling. And if I'm not in a condition there to be there for the client, so being there for the client is a very important aspect of preparing yourself to serve. So these are the things that are happening from gross going to the more subtle, and from the subtlest going to the more, subtle. And I'm talking about then the doing part and being part and where it gets integrated. So now this is how it works. And how do I bring in then Vedic thinking is I have been looking at it from different perspectives, and I build it up in 12S model, which I'm not going to talk about because that's will be a very long presentation. I took up only the concept of Shakti, and I divided it in three. I said there is a Tattva Shakti, which is the more gross one, the Sankalp Shakti, which is about the will to act, the conviction to act, and the Prem Shakti. If there is no love, then, how will you be able to serve the client in the best possible way? So then I mentioned there also, okay, if we apply it to other organizations, you can say there is this purification which is very much needed. And if you look at the context of Maharishi Yogi's practices, Ayurveda, different yogic kriya are important, and the TM is for the will to act, where we say there is a unbounded, infinite ocean of consciousness from which we can tap. And the Prem Shakti is, if you see, okay, how can we connect to that Prem Shakti? There is no rule book for that. While for the others, you may have rule books and processes. That is just Bhakti, Prem Shakti. It's connecting to nature is one of the ways to connect. So this is, if this is,
Thank you, please.
So I first wanted to start off by thanking Satinder for saying that we're all august, and I feel especially august now that I'm 72, so I feel like I'm in the spring, not the spring, the fall, the autumn, or however Frank Sinatra put it, the autumn of my day, the autumn of the years. So I just wanted to, I only have a few comments. I don't want to repeat what I wrote in the paragraph because that's already there, but I just wanted to make a few comments. The first one is that I am not an expert on the Vedas, and I've read the Bhagavad Gita some, but I certainly can't say it the way, in that language. But my whole experience with spirituality and this whole practice began for me with personal experience. I've had several transpersonal experiences. Starting, the first one was in 1976. It was before I even started meditating. And the way Satinder described that feeling of oneness, this just happened to me kind of spontaneously. I was at I don't know if anybody remembers National Training Laboratories. It's an old thing with T groups and all that stuff. And I was in the graduate student professional development program at National Training Laboratories in 1976, in the middle of a very intense T group experience. Over the weekend, I and my roommate went to this place called Step Falls, which I thought was in Bethel, Maine, but it turns out isn't. It's somewhere else in Maine, about an hour away. And I remember having a hard time climbing into, getting into the falls. And then when I was there, I was just overwhelmed with this feeling of oneness. I don't even know how I made it back. I mean, I had a hard time getting up there, but it felt like I just kind of floated back. I was back in the hotel. I was playing music on the piano, and I don't even know how to play piano. I'm playing like what you hear now on these spa channels, like New Age music, and I'm playing New Age music, and I felt this feeling of oneness that for me lasted, I don't even know how long. I think it lasted at least several days. And that was the first time it happened. And it's happened to me 3 or 4 times since then. Now, being an academic, well, at the time being a doctoral student, the first thing I did once I had the experience was develop a whole model trying to explain the experience. So I had the right brain experience and I had the left brain experience of trying to map the whole thing out. And that was before I learned TM. Then in 1981, I started learning transcendental meditation. That was the first meditation I learned. And when I started doing the meditation, I was getting these headaches and I didn't know what the headaches meant. And as it turned out, I was in Scranton, Pennsylvania at the time. And it turned out there was a guy in Wilkes-Barre who used to teach at Maharishi University. He was a psychologist who happened to be in Scranton or in Wilkes-Barre at the time. And he had written a book on psychological disturbances accompanying the growth of consciousness. And he explained to me that what happened was that all my chakras had opened up. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I never heard of chakras. I never heard of any of this stuff. And that was certainly very interesting. And my experience, and I've had 3 or 4 other experiences like that along the way over the years, mostly when I'm out in nature. And the whole thing just got me so interested in the field of spirituality. And that's why I started writing about it. So that's just a little background. And to me, this experience of oneness is a gift that only comes as a gift. Somebody was writing that yesterday in the discussion thing. And they were saying, well, how do I get, how can I have that experience? Well, you can't force it. It comes as a gift. And when you get it, it's just amazing. The question I wanted to raise today is, okay, how can we maintain that presence? Since you can't force that to happen, like how can we maintain that presence? Last year, 3 years ago, at the last time they had a live Academy of Management, there was a session that Satinder was in and I was in, where they were talking about that abiding in awareness all the time. Because most people, when they're doing TM or other meditative practices, are doing it a couple of times a day. The rest of the day, you're out dealing with all the stress. And I was really struck by that expression of abiding in awareness all the time. And so how can we abide in that awareness all the time? And it seems to me there's many ways to do it. There's TM and there's other things besides TM. They all head towards the same way. Over the years, I must have done about 30 different meditative things, including holosync, where, with the binaural beats and you listen to the thing and it takes you down lower and lower brainwave frequencies. I've done all the levels of that. I've done Jewish meditation. I've done Catholic meditation. To me, it's all one, which I guess is the bottom line. It's all one. It's that state of oneness that Satinder was talking about. And the question is, how can we abide in that state all the time?
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be amongst all of you. I will share just 1 or 2 slides here briefly. Let's see if this comes up. All right, you can see this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So, we're talking about human flourishing, and for me as a physician, the most important word there is human. So when I went to medical school, and when all of us actually started in grade school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, we were taught that we're made up of a bunch of parts, right? You put some particles together and you get an atom. You put some atoms together, you get some molecules. Molecules make cells, cells make organs, organ systems, and voila, you have the human being. But in fact, physics has moved past that over a century ago. Philosophy moved past that millennia ago. But for some reason in medical science, we're still believing this outdated idea of what the human being is, or in my view, what human anatomy is. So I'll present you with a problem. If you go to a physician and describe an experience you're having, a distressing experience, the map of you that they will use is the one that you see on your left. That's the anatomical map of what you are. If you happen to go to a physician in China, they might use the second one, right? If you happen to go to a certain kind of philosophical physician, they might use the third one. human anatomy as information. If you go to another one, they might use the fourth one, the chakras, right? The energy centers of the human being. So we have a major problem here because we're trying to describe what is happening with us. And yet, depending on who you go to, the map that we are using of what we are is different. So of course, the question is, who's right? Who has the correct map? And I think you'll realize, just like on Google Maps, you can use the standard view, but then you can click to the satellite view and you have other details. Just like that, depending on which view we click, which filter of the mind we apply, we see a different lens or a different layer of human anatomy. And of course, all of these are valid aspects or valid layers of human anatomy. So if we want a complete medicine, if we want a complete understanding of human anatomy and physiology, we have to move to comprehensive human anatomy. And this is the basis of second mind medicine, right? What is the second mind? The second mind is that mind which goes beyond particularity. It is that mind which self-superimposes boundaries to appear as the particulate world, and of course, as the boundaries of the human being, the torso, the pelvis, the extremities, the head, and so on. Right? So the differentiation of the second mind is what we take to be first mind anatomy, the different kinds of which we see here at different levels. And of course, we mentioned quantum physics, quantum mechanics before. Yes, of course, if you want to boil quantum physics down into one or two words, it's going to be boundary, right? The entire difficulty and beauty and challenge of quantum physics is that it challenges us to go beyond the idea of boundaries. Things are made from smaller things only for so long, but once we go beyond the level of elementary particles, things are no longer made from smaller things. They are made of vast fields. And so what we are doing is negating the independent existence of boundaries. If you look at the word quantum, it existed centuries before quantum physics adopted it, before Max Planck adopted it, right? So the word quantum, the understanding of the word quantum is not a physics understanding. It is essentially an understanding of the mind, the nature of identity. When identity is localized and particularized and individuated, or in other words, when it's quantized, we perceive a quantized world, we perceive a quantized form of human anatomy as we see here. But to go beyond this, to go to the second mind and second mind anatomy, we need to recognize that by inquiring into the nature of identity through the portal of our own mind and the experience of individual consciousness, we open up into a broader field of recognition. So what is the practical understanding of this in medicine? It is that we are human beings, not only human bodies.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you. And I come from an almost 720-year-old lineage of women Ayurvedic healers from Kerala, and I now live in California. And I wanted to talk to you today about Kayakalpa. Kayakalpa is a science of longevity rooted in the Vedic sciences. It's not just about having beautiful hair and skin and all of that, but the added bonus is to have a mind that goes very well with the body, thereby creating a perfect mind-body synergy. So the idea is not to just live for a considerable long period of time, but to have a brain that helps you through the process while you're at it. So a few points that I wanted to really speak about was, when we talk about business, people always think, oh, it's about, your audience, the right kind of product and all of that. But more than anything else, it is the internal environment as much as it is the external environment. It has plenty to do with what's going on in your psyche when you are actually conducting proper business. So the idea is not to be successful for a small period of time. It is about the long haul. It is about, is it just the concept of I being successful, or can we all grow together? All of us growing together is really the essence of the concept of flourishing. If you really dissect the word, illness versus wellness, I versus the we, right? When it is all about the I, there is so much of illness happening. And if you were to just replace that with a we, the kind of wellness that we experience is not just limited to the individual that forms the team is impacted, and thereby the product is impacted, the culture of the company, so forth, is impacted. So very many a time when I'm asked, Kaya Kalpa, so let's all live for a long time. What is the point of living a long time if we are not serving a purpose? So this beautiful thing called life between birth and death is not just a journey. It needs to be something that all of us spend our time usefully creating an impact. So when you really think about the essence of Kaya Kalpa and what it really has to do with business, I can only think of 3 points out of the several thousands. The first is to be able to pause. When you have lots of activity happening in your life, the busiest person has the most time. It's so important to pause between pockets of activity so that you're impactful and rested before you embark on the next activity. The second thing which comes to mind is planning. So in Kaya Kalpa, we are always encouraged to plan whatever it is that you want to do, not to absolute detail, but to an extent that you have like an outline created for you, and then you allow yourself to create the energy around it. The third aspect of Kaya Kalpa is not just about being proficient. It is also about creating space in your proficiency of your subject to be creative. And this type of creativity is linked to a large extent to the health of your cells and the cognition that your cells get from sparks of creativity is something quite remarkable. My grandmother just celebrated her 107th birthday. She still sees clients, not patients, like what Dr. Sharda said. It is so important to use the right nomenclature when we are addressing people. In my practice here as well, we only see clients. We never see patients. We always have an environment of varied color so that people don't come into what we consider visual hostility. So Kaya Kalpa is also a little bit of other Vedic sciences like Vastu Shastra, as well as Nadi Pariksha, which has its origins with Ayurveda or the pulse diagnosis. So I think, Anil, I don't know where the timing is going with this, but we'll.
Thank you very much for your opening positions, one big idea, etc.
All right.
Let me turn on Dr. Dhiman. So you had some interesting questions, so you invite the panelists to sort of answer that one question or two questions on each.
Yes, I wanted to actually underscore what Jerry was mentioning. I have had the good fortune of traveling with Jerry on several conferences, and Jerry will wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and will find a flowing water. No matter we are in New Mexico, you are in Boston, he will find flowing water. And you can always find Jerry sitting by the flowing water at 4:30 a.m. wherever he happens to be. And I have had the opportunity of sometimes sitting with him, and I can see that sense of wholeness kind of enveloping him, so to speak. The reason I'm trying to single Jerry out, not to the exclusion of anybody else, but because he's not even born in Indian culture, but he's so open. He's so open to the beauty that the wisdom, the Vedic wisdom is offering, and he's so able to resonate with the idea that we are all discussing here. I wanted to say that I was taking Anilji some mental notes. It is so wonderful, the Tattva Shakti and the Prem Shakti, which kind of morphs what we have, Ichha Shakti, Gyan Shakti, and Kriya Shakti in our culture. These are fundamental things about human nature. We all have Ichha Shakti. We wish to do things. We all have Kriya Shakti. We want to do things. And we all have Gyan Shakti, which is kind of the the nervous center as a second mind, maybe if I may take the liberty to use the word second mind as Dr. Anoop Kumarji has used. So you see how, what Vaidya ji was saying, how these things blend. And I love this word boundary less. Actually, the whole foundation of quantum physics is what they call non-locality. We are not discretely located in time and space. Time and space is a mental construct, and Immanuel Kant said that many centuries ago, but science is trying to help us understand. But the question is, if everything is energy, this is where the science has come to, that everything is energy. It just morphs into waves of possibility. Then the big question here is, Nanilji, for us to take away, who knows the energy? That is where the beauty, Vedic beauty comes. There is energy, but I, as the awareness, consciousness, is aware of that energy. I am the container and the energy is the content. So that means energy becomes the epiphenomena and I, as the pure awareness, becomes the phenomenon. So this is called stretching those boundaries. And the whole Vedic culture is just on that cusp where science meets the reality and the philosophy, and where science, physics, metaphysics becomes blurred. So, let me ask our panelists, maybe they can share one 30-second idea in which they have used what they have described as their key idea, and they have seen results with working with clients, or I call it participants, people who share the space journey with us in bringing oneness and flourishing to their life work and to the lives of their students, participants, and clients. We can start with Dr. Anoop Kumar, because I took the liberty to use his expression of second mind, in the sense of the mind which kind of transcends the physicality of the mind as the older medical science knows it.
Yeah, it really transcends all kinds of boundaries of delineation of the different kinds of bodies. It's not really mind in the classical sense. It's not opposed to energy or information or physicality. It kind of appears as all of these as the idea. If we apply this idea to anatomy, then we have different layers of anatomy. And the implication here is that consciousness is primary, right? That we can have energy, we can have information, we can have chakras, we can have doshas, we can have all kinds of differentiated aspects of what we are. But then if consciousness is primary, of course, we're not talking about localized consciousness, mine or yours in particular, but a non-local field-like nature. Then if this is true, then the implication of healing, of course, is that healing is multi-directional. And that means that we can start in any aspect of being human, whether it's the physical aspect or the mental aspect or the energetic aspect or the informational aspect or any system, sen lines, chakras, meridians, doshas, anywhere we can start. Or as Vaidya ji said, by changing the environment, right? By changing the colors, by changing the temperature. We are veritably in a sea of information or energy or consciousness, whatever word, doesn't really matter. But we are floating and soaking in a sea. And when we recognize that, we can start anywhere in that sea. And if we apply the seed of healing, it sprouts in all directions. This is multi-directional healing. Just as if you put enough salt into one area of a swimming pool, that salt will spread throughout the entire swimming pool. Chlorine will spread throughout the swimming pool. And so the application then is when we can access healing in the way that works for us, not the way that just that doctor was trained or this doctor was trained or this person was trained, but the way that is meaningful for us, right? When we can access it that way in whatever aspect of being human comes naturally, then that can spread through physicality and mentality and energy, make sense and organize what we call physical illness and wellness, mental illness and wellness, and so on. So multi-directional healing depends on this concept of the primacy of consciousness, which is exemplified in second mind medicine.
Excellent, excellent. Actually, Dr. Kumar, I was thinking about, and as Dr. Vaidya was explaining in her part, and even so, Sharda ji, I was thinking about, we have this theory of 5 sheaths, Panchakosha. You have Anandamaya Kosh, you have Vigyanmaya Kosh, Pranmaya Kosh, and then you have, Manomaya Kosh, then you have Vigyanmaya Kosh, and then you have Anandamaya. So, but the question is, I once asked this question to my Vedanta teacher. He asked me, and that goes back to our fundamental understanding in this session. When I said that, there is this concept of 5 koshas. So he asked me, he said, Satinder, can you show me the boundaries of those koshas? Can you show me where your Anandamaya Kosh begins and your Vigyanmaya Kosh ends, and where your Vigyanmaya Kosh begins and your Pranmaya Kosh? Of course, you cannot do that. Our body, our functioning is at such a superhuman intelligent level that we just have this experience. We are listening. I am seeing all of your beautiful faces. I'm hearing all of you. I'm also reading some of the chats, but there is something which in Panchadashi, it's called samvit, that power, which is organizing this whole thing, hearing, seeing, and touching. I think if we understand, if we pay attention to that power, that is liberating. So let's go to Vaidya ji, because I have been referencing both of you, so maybe she can help also enlighten us from her practice.
So neuroscience teaches us that about 95% of the time we're all creatures of habit. So just like distraction, is a very unconscious habit. What we've noticed in our clients is that if we bring upon clarity into their minds and a certain epitome of responsiveness, then automatically the healing commences much faster. And the reason for this is that just like we have a distraction, which is pretty much an unconscious habit, but clarity can be made into a very conscious function of habit. And different people have different ways through which the clarity can come about in their lives. But something as simple as, quite recently, I was telling someone, which is the room that you frequent often? And they said, my study. And I said, well, is your study clean? Is it like clutter-free? And this gentleman said, no. And I said, have you ever considered cleaning up? And so he just said to me, he says, I came here for supplements. Then I said, well, this is part of your supplement protocol. I would like you to clean up your environment. Well, he was a tad lazy to do it, but he called me to make some suggestions, and I got somebody who organizes in touch with him. This headache, which has plagued him for more than 23 years, went away overnight. So, clarity, not just which is internal, but the clarity that's fueled by looking at something external. That's a huge takeaway for me in my own life. I think it's so important to be organized. And when you have organization outside, it does create, an undeterred organization inside of you.
Wow. Well, you see, this is exactly what as we are reverting back to the quantum physics metaphors, like a quantum soup, in which there is something called self-organizing intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole idea of TM meditation and other forms of meditation, I had the privilege of attending 2 Vipassana 12-day silent meditation retreats, when I was working on the Buddhist aspect of my teaching studies. I discovered that when you touch that ground, the differences become irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
That the gender becomes irrelevant. Your position in life becomes relevant. All that you have accumulated at the maybe first level of your intellect, it becomes irrelevant, and it is all good there. It is all peace there, and the flourishing that we are seeking all here is just naturally. Somebody wrote in the chat, who can we abide in it? We can't abide in it, as Jerry was beautifully saying. It comes to you. You see, the whole beauty of meditation is it is the art of not doing. If you still have to do meditation, it's not, then you're doing something else. Maybe you're working out, then you should better go to gym. The whole idea of meditation is you just let go and let things be. And what a beautiful metaphor. Sometime my class participant will ask me, what's the best advice you can give us about human nature? I said 2 words, let be, let others be. Because give them the space to grow, to create, and to love each other. And then let the human magic take place. Sharda ji, what do you have from your side of the world for us in terms of your practice in helping us live what you just said?
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. According to my own practices, my own individual practices, and also helping organizations, what I found is that if you start very quickly with meditation, sometimes you are experiencing a lot of growth and, a lot of things are happening, but sometimes it feels like you have to take a few steps back again. And it's like, okay, what is happening here? So it's not a linear process. So from these practices and helping others and talking to people, I realized that this direction of saying that, okay, there are mind, body, you have the mind, you have the body and the emotion. And as one of the other panelists said, you can start anywhere. You can start, as Jerry said, he has practiced 30 meditation forms or more. You can start anywhere. You can start with any meditation technique. But I believe that towards that coherence, towards that oneness, we have to work at several levels or several purposes, you can say, or from different perspectives, but we have to work on all 3. And for me, the 3 are what I said, the Tattva Shakti, the Sankalp and the Prem. And it goes back to, you may say, the Tantra, Mantra, and Yantra. And so it is not only the mantra meditation, which was helpful for me, but for me, like the Tantra part, which I call the more gross part, which is with yogic practices, Ayurvedic purification, is very much important, because if you don't do that, and I think many organizations, they teach a lot of many practices towards that meditation, towards that dhyan, and then they forget that purification is such an important thing. I notice myself, if you don't spend enough of time on that purification, the rest will not come to you, because you can work only on 2 things. The Tantra part, so that's the Sharir, the body part, and then you can work on the Man part, which is through meditation techniques. And then the other 3rd part, which is the happening, that happening is just happening. So you can't work towards it. So you can only work, the remote controls are in the body or in the mind. And so the devotional part is very, very much important as a kind of a condition. And for me, the condition is connecting to nature. And connecting to nature means connecting to our natural being, which is loving others, giving, all those kinds of kindness characteristics, but also literally going to nature. And if we say everything is one, we are connected, then connection means also connecting to everything which is there. And what's the best way? It's going to the nature. But that's not something which we can, train ourselves directly to realize. It's just an happening, an outcome of all the others. And purification is a very important one, because that is often forgotten. We can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. So beautifully put, Sharda ji. Yes, we have to do that. We have to start with purification, but then the purification becomes sort of second nature. It becomes a part of the cycle. It is not. You see, one of the challenges with meditation is people think let me do everything else, and then I will do meditation. Meditation should, regarding Buddha, it is said that his sitting was not different from his walking. Meaning, sitting meaning meditation, it was not different from his walking was also a part of meditation. So from deliberate practice, we have to come to a natural point where our whole life becomes a long meditative expression to the divinity, to the wholeness, to the totality. Jerry,
Every activity can be, sorry, every activity can be a meditation, you know?
Yes. Actually, every activity is a meditation.
Yeah.
We just don't know it, you know, because you can't carry any activity without bringing the Jnana Shakti with it. You have to bring the light of awareness to do anything, including our presentation. So Jnana Shakti is already there. We just have to recognize it as such. Jerry, I was wondering about your presence in terms of in the academy, your work in the academy for many years. How have you been able to guide people like me, many of my colleagues who came to you, at the Academy of Management when you were so kind to embrace people, beginners like us?
Thank you. Well, first of all, nowadays I get up at 3 a.m. instead of 4 a.m. And
Okay.
just naturally get up at 3 a.m. I don't set the alarm or anything. And I spend the first hour or so doing different kinds of meditation. But to answer your question, it's true that when you came, you needed a lot of help. No, I'm just kidding, Satinder. I think it's important at the academy. I feel the important thing is to embody the principles. And so I was the first chair when we first started the MSI group. I was the first chair. I thought it was very important to create the culture, that the culture was the most important thing. So I went to, I went out of my way to introduce people to other people and to just try to build their culture of acceptance and oneness. And I know after 2 years, I think in the second year we started, I suggested we do morning meditations. And so, which are still continuing. So we would have a morning meditation, which they ended up opening up to the entire academy. So sometimes in the morning, we might have like 50, 100 people show up just for the morning meditation. And they weren't necessarily from MSR. And, so to me, that's the most important thing. I also thought, in my mind, the non-academic sessions were way more, like whenever I had a choice, I would not go to paper sessions.
Thank you.
I hate paper. I mean, but I would go to whatever movement session was there or anything to get out of the head, because it's too much being in the head. But so maybe that answers. I still think it's important, especially for MSI and for other conferences, the human contact, the human connection is way more important than the whatever theoretical things are going on. And that was the same thing with my classes, where I found that I was teaching at a Jesuit school. And so I made a big thing out of, because the Jesuits have two things, magis and cura personalis, which means care of the whole person. So I made that every year in my write-up and all the way to becoming a full professor. I said, look, I am working on care for the whole person. So I teach meditation in all my classes, and it's much more important that a student understand one concept and applies it to themselves than if they know 30 concepts out of a book. So I gave a lot of, all the assignments were self-analysis. Everybody had to do, write-ups on themselves. They had choices, but it was always self-analysis. And years later, I hear back from students. I think the other thing was important, both at the academy and in classes, is it's way more important who we are as persons than anything we try to teach. Words go in and out. The theories, I forgot 90% of the management theories I was teaching, especially now I'm retired. And the thing is, when you look at meta-analyses of management theories, they all got disproven. Whatever the hottest management theory was, they do a meta-analysis. No, it's not true. The only one that's hung around all these years is Maslow's hierarchy, and that's the one theory that most of the research doesn't prove, but it makes sense intuitively. So again, I think if students got more out of me talking about my own personal experiences, then, oh, well, let me put up the chart, and here's this chart, this says this, and this says this, and this. And
One final big idea. I always ask people that what like Christ said, love thy neighbor. What will be your that one liner, like which you can write on part of the napkin, you are sitting with somebody. So I would like to ask my distinguished panelists, what is that one overarching idea that you have discovered in your life work related to this topic that you would like to share? And then maybe I can say a few liners, here and there, and then we can turn it over to you. Let's start with Vaidya ji. Sorry for putting you on spot.
The one word for me would be consecration. Normally when we think of consecration, we only think of like a consecrated temple or gurudwara or a church. But I think that consecration, by way of what Sharda ji was saying, when you purify yourself, and like you were mentioning, the idea of it becoming a very natural part of you. And that's why I mentioned, you have to detox before you retox, because that thing in life is very cyclical. So to maintain that consecration, that purity within, not just with your biochemical aspects and not just with just cleaning your lung or your liver or your kidney, but this is more about harnessing the power of creativity and purity of thoughts, not so much like this whole Pavitri avatar type of thing, but the purity of what makes you bloom or blossom. I think that automatically creates a synergy of consecration, and that will fuel its energy onto your external environment as it will flourish your internal.
Thank you. Sharda ji?
Yes, thank you, Satinder ji. For me, it's integrativeness. And integrativeness, why? Because I really believe it's not just one perspective, or we work on one purpose in life. As our Vedic knowledge already says, we have spiritual and worldly goals. So it's not putting spirituality above the material world. It's both are needed. So for me, integrativeness is also about body, mind, emotion. So it's not that we say, okay, it's about the jnana shakti always. Without all the others, it will not work out. And if you say, what is the main direction for me is to remind myself all the time that I'm not a doer. That's the hardest part, but that's, I think, what I would like to achieve. That I'm not a doer, because that's the bhakti part, that's the devotional part, that's the part where we say we love others. And if you bring these kinds of practices to the organization, it will create so much energy and so much of love and output, which I've seen in this organization of Butsor. If you give the autonomy to people, you don't put rule books, you just let them do the way they would like to do the things naturally. And that means you should be open towards integrativeness, because there are so many different perspectives. So you have to let go as a leader and find different perspectives. Give space for different purposes, because sometimes some people will be at the first stage in their life. So structure is important. Others may not like structure, but you have to create that space. Just create the space and let everyone be. So from doing to being, and it's a long journey, but only if people remind themselves that I'm not a doer. And that's a very tough thing for us as scholars, and we are having an academic conference here. But I think that's what Jerry Biberman was also talking about. If you put all these theories very much from the cognitive perspective only. And I was also lucky to have Jerry as my mentor when I went to the Academy of Management. So integrativeness is the message where, we are not a doer, is the path forward for a flourishing organization.
Yeah. Sharda ji, we tend to forget that we are not human doings, we are human beings. So we put so much emphasis on doing, whereas our very essence is human being. Our essence is being, not doing. Dr. Anoop Kumarji, what is your one big idea, one big quantum idea, if I may use that word loosely?
Well, I'll just say in the context of what we're talking about rather than an
Yeah.
overall picture. In the context of what we're saying, I think the idea is that all theories fail, right? And it doesn't matter who came up with a theory. A theory is basically a bridge to get from a current level of awareness to another level of awareness. And that theory will go with certain practices, certain understandings, a certain culture. And ultimately, that theory has to fail. If at some point it doesn't fail, that just means that we're not there yet. We're not growing yet. And that when that theory fails, then the next one will come, until theories are more just fun rather than things that we need, right? So I think I would leave that message that all theories fail. So what is it that we are trying to map with theories?
Right. So we should keep our eye on that rather than, they say an ounce of practice is better than tons of theory. But we also have to keep in mind, going back to the integrative process, an ounce of theory can also serve foundation for tons of practice. So maybe we need both at some level. Jerry, what's your final wisdom, parting shot, so to speak?
Well, I have two things. First of all through the conference, I kept thinking of Beatles songs, and especially George Harrison and Within You, Without You from Sgt. Pepper, and All You Need Is Love, and all that. And it reminds me of discussions I've had with other people, academicians today. We think, oh, wow, this is so great. We're coming up with something new. And it's like things are going round and round and round. Because back in the 50s, not so much, but back in the 60s, maybe because people were stoned on a bunch of psychedelics or whatever. But that seemed to be a gateway to kind of what is happening now. I never did drugs, but I've heard that, like when somebody takes heroin, the feeling is so amazing. That's why they keep taking the heroin, because they want to get back to that feeling, which seems kind of similar to what happens when somebody has this kind of an opening and they want it to happen again. I think though I think our natural state is this state of oneness and calmness and beingness. So, and it's more just going back to our natural state. So one line I could think of is "There's no place like home" from the Wizard of Oz, or the whole idea that you already have all this stuff. You have it inside you all the time. The other thing I would love to see a paradigm shift in the academy away from ego to more like group. The whole time I was there, starting back in the 80s, it's like quoting this person, this guy's theory, that guy's all men. This person's man's theory, that man's theory. And it wasn't even the theory, it was the person. I talked to this person and this person here, and I'm citing this person. And, it was all connections and all men connecting with other men. I remember a book years ago called Beyond Science, Beyond Therapy. And it was about this woman's experience in the American Psychological Association, which Academy of Management is very kind of almost the same thing. And she was saying, this is all a bunch of men who like to feel so important with each other. Then they hit on the women, when they have the socials. And I would love to see a paradigm shift away from all that and more to one of inclusion and getting away from whose idea it was, because it's all basically the same idea. I mean, we're coming back to an idea that's been around for millennia. What do they call it sometimes? And there's different expressions, but it's the whole point that all of the mystics had this idea thousands of years ago. So we're not inventing something new. Even quantum physics, the whole thing about quantum physics, I mean, it's really neat. But, shamans knew this stuff 300, 400 years ago.
Yep.
Perennial philosophy. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, perennial. Dennis said perennial. Thank you, Jerry. I think I'm glad that you brought us to this note of humility. I think above all, we scholars and specialists and teachers and students alike, we need. I remember, one of my spiritual gurus, if I may use that word loosely, Will Durant, the great American historian, said at the end of his life work, having written 11 volumes of Story of Civilization, he said, education is a progressive discovery of our own ignorance. I think if I may use two lines of a Urdu poet, यही जाना कि कुछ नहीं जाना, यही जाना कि कुछ नहीं जाना, ये भी एक उम्र में हुआ मालूम. It took me a lifetime to know that I don't know anything, which Socrates, that's where he starts with. My humble one idea related to this flourishing thing would be that we somehow graduate to a point where our whole life becomes an offering. If we want to experience the joy of living, the flourishing, uninterrupted, unimpeded, seamless joy of living, then no matter what work we have, let's come to a frame of mind where it whole becomes an offering to the totality, to the divine, to whoever you love. You can say that, to that supreme power. And I think discovering our divinity and manifesting our divinity, as Vivekananda said, would be the goal that humanity, as brothers and sisters, we can aspire for, discovering the divinity within us and helping others discover their divinity within them, and then all of that offering it to the universe as our humble offering. Anilji,
Thank you to everybody. So let me come to the second idea. First is about connecting the inside and the outside. Flourishing on the outside can lead to flourishing on the expansion on the inside. Expansion on the inside through meditation or transcendence can lead to expansion outside. To me, that Damru kind of chart, or like hourglass chart, is like expand outside, expand inside. The more you do outside, you can more expand inside. That I would like your insight on that. But before we do that we've discussed a little bit. But this particular second insight again came to me by talking to Dr. Kak a few days ago, who will be our keynote speaker. We'll be talking about quantum and artificial intelligence and many Vedic technologies together in our closing keynote. This idea of uncontainerizing ourselves. Uncontainerizing. So we treat time as a container. That's kind of a big driving metaphor in our life. You read a book called Metaphors We Live By, and or various other places, that we have this 90 minutes as a container. I'm living this thing as container. I'm talking uncontainerizing. So the absurdity is very clear to me. But nonetheless, how do we uncontainerize our lives, first of all? In the flow idea, right? So I'm just saying one of the things I just wrote down is that the big insight for me is to uncontainerize ourselves. It comes. So what do you think of this word idea, uncontainerize? I have to get to.
To me, it seems like we create our own containers. There is no container. The only containers we create are the ones that we create for ourselves. We're all one, and all this separation is self-imposed. So that's what I would say.
Sorry. So the whole idea to me is that I don't think that we should think of ourselves just as one person. I mean, there has to be inclusivity on so many levels. This is not just a social situation. It's not a political situation. I think the idea is that when we think of it, like I was saying, with the concept of we, with the I completely dissolving, embracing the aspects of Advaita in your everyday, I think a lot of these issues which have become a calamity in the world will just disappear.
Very good. Thank you. Sharda? Uncontainerize.
Yeah, I think we need concepts, we need definitions, but if we talk about spirituality ourselves, it's about realizing. And so actually we are talking about realizing. The academic field has put a lot of stress on naming, and then a little bit on knowing. But I think what we need is realizing, knowing, naming. And that would be the paradigm shift, because realizing starts with embodiment and experiencing. And so if we give those type of exercises in the classroom, everyone has some knowledge to share, everyone has some experience to share. So if you give that space, then we become very close to our natural selves. So realizing, And then knowing means that you talk about it. Sometimes you search someone, as a kind of a mentor. And then naming is very much important because we want to, of course, define things in order to understand. And we have put too much stress on that naming part. So I
Okay.
think that's what I.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Dr. Anoop. 15 seconds. Containerizing.
Uncontainerize equals deboundarize.
Deboundarize. Yep. Unboundarize. Unboundarize.
We're superimposing boundaries as we choose. Have fun with it. Use what works.
Exactly. Choose boundaries for what it's worth, but then don't take them too seriously. Okay. Satinderji, 15 seconds.
Well, Anilji, my approach is rather pedestrian, it's not scholarly. People talk about thinking outside the box. I always invite people to expand their boxes, sometime to allow other. So one of the way to uncontainerize oneself is to extend the boundaries of those so that it becomes nebulous, because all those boundaries are just artificial. So be aware of that you are pure consciousness, boundless, akashvat, paripurnam, sarvagata, nishparpancha, asangaha, and all that.
Yeah, thank you. I used to think of that, boundary, how big the boundary is, and other side of the boundary, and expanding the boundary, till I realized when you transcend, actually you dissolve the boundary. Because no matter where the boundary is, you will touch that boundary and you'll be dissatisfied, because there's always the other side, and you think that the grass is greener kind of mechanism kicks in. What if there were no boundaries? And when you're in the inner space, it's unboundedness. So it's like there's no boundary, like Anoop said. So anyway, I feel that uncontainerizing is, you're all talking in various ways, and as Sharda said, there is certain practical need to containerize, to name and naming, but you don't want to put too much emphasis on it. As Jerry said, it goes too far in academia, and then we just create these kind of patterns. Let me also invite maybe Dr. Dennis Heaton, maybe if he has a few words to say. Let me just make him allowed to talk, right? Okay, just any insight? Dennis, you can talk if you want.
Well, you surprised me with that.
Uncontainerized. you're called out of nowhere.
I want to thank everyone for their participation today, and all the people commenting in the chat as well. And the title of the session was Vedic, and I'm very grateful to the Vedic tradition and to all the scholars like Satinder who can cite for us from the Bhagavad Gita, because there's such rich wisdom that we enjoy the blessing of from that tradition. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, for those who know, there's a certain Vedic tradition picture at the back. So I want to thank you all, and please provide us feedback. The link is already there, and otherwise our student volunteers will also post the link again. And so thank you very much.
Anilji, can we end with a prayer?
Yes, absolutely. Short, quick prayer. Yeah.
Purnamadah, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Namah. Hari Om.